Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's now time for your weekly current affairs program. We call this program Melting Pot, a program which gives you an in-depth analysis of those issues you hear and talk about each and every day. Remember, it could be issues to do with business, politics, entertainment, or sport. We get to discuss them on this particular platform. My name is Oscar Pambuka, and I hope I find you well. And before we start that program, do me a special favor. Go tell your neighbor, Melting Pot has just started. Now, the education sector in Zimbabwe is one contentious issue, yet the country has the highest literacy rate in Africa. What is happening to the quality of education in Zimbabwe? The recent ordinary level results from the 2012 ZIMTA exams has sparked a lot of debate, with people asking what really has gone wrong. Relevant stakeholders have actually resorted to the blame game, but the question still stands: who is to blame for the declining standards of the education in the country? Now, to discuss these and other issues, we have invited in the studio. I'll start by introducing the Minister of Education, Sport, Arts and Culture, Senator David Coltart. Thank you so much for joining us on Melting Pot.
Thank you, Oscar. Good evening.
Good evening. Also on the program, we've got the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe Teachers Association, Mr. Sifiso Ndlovu. It's a pleasure to have you on Melting Pot.
Thank you, Oscar, and good evening, Zimbabwe.
Now, let's go straight to the pot. And how would you describe, Mr. Ndlovu, the state of education in Zimbabwe? Are you happy?
Certainly, educators are not happy, Oscar. Fundamentally, because the remuneration aspect is not exciting. It is crowding their minds, and that is an area of concern which the state must immediately intervene and try to resolve. We are also looking at the infrastructure, particularly in the rural areas. It is crowded, dilapidated. That is not conducive for a good education to take place in those schools. And the living conditions for educators are appalling, with teachers sharing a single four-room dwelling house, even if they are married. That is indeed overcrowding and a demeaning status of the educators. That is an area of concern. So the minister rightly points out to the delivery of our textbooks. I think we should really give accolades to that hard work that we have done in the last 4 years, together with the communities and the partners in education. That was a really collaborated effort, and we want to register that was a very positive effort indeed. But then, let us now attend to the infrastructure. Let us now attend also to the information structure. The data that we require is not tip-top. The data that we need to use to make decisions must be available and must be in our fingertips. That data is not forthcoming. I think that is an area of concern even in the Ministry of Education for purposes of recording and knowing who is doing what and where are teachers and what qualifications they hold and how far can we develop them.
Now, Senator Coltart, if you look in the capital city of Harare, there are a lot of unregistered colleges which are just mushrooming. And I want to come to the Honorable Senator. Are you aware of that?
Absolutely. And I think it's an illustration of the crisis in education. You know, I spoke just now about the improvement, but let me stress, as Mr. Ndlovu said, that education still is in crisis. We've got a lot of work to do. And one of the manifestations of the crisis are these private colleges which are mushrooming in our society. They are a response, for example, to the hot seating that is taking place in many of our schools. Our schools are full to overflowing. And many parents do not want to send their children to schools that only sit in the afternoon, for example, or schools that have 50-to-1 pupil-teacher ratios. And so they are tempted to go to these private institutions because they're told that they'll have smaller class sizes, better instruction, and so forth. So we're aware of them mushrooming.
But you've done nothing about it.
Well, no, it's not that we haven't done anything about it. Let me stress that the root of the excellence in Zimbabwe's education sector is found in private education. That's where mission schools came from. We have very strong private institutions. So it's not private institutions in themselves that are wrong. It is when those private institutions are not registered, do not comply with minimum building standards or educational standards. Now, one of the problems that we faced in the last few years is that we haven't had the human or other resource capacity to actually police the education sector. Most of the policing is done by district education officers and inspectors. Some of those posts haven't been filled, and most of those people have not had vehicles. Over the last couple of years, we've been purchasing vehicles, we've been filling those vacancies, and we are now systematically going out into communities throughout Zimbabwe to identify where these illegal institutions are, encouraging them to register, encouraging them to meet those minimum standards. But we will close them down if they don't meet those minimum standards.
I'm still personally not impressed by that response. I'll cross over to the Chief Executive of the Zimbabwe Teachers Association to find out what actually is being done on the ground to stop these mushrooming colleges. How would you come in?
Well, clearly, we are not a proponent for private education, and we will not want to see education being privatized. In as much as possible, the state must fund education, and we must see strengthened public education. It is good for government, it is good for the country, and we think private education should not supersede public education. So if those colleges that are mushrooming are colleges that not meet the standards that we have set for education, certainly I would support a situation where they are closed immediately so that we can give chance to private education and also give a fair charge. The parents who are sending their children to private schools of that nature are actually cheating their children and therefore are not doing a good work for their children for the future. We should also educate them in that regard.
Now, how would you respond to what I'm about to say? These are some of the allegations which are coming, that organizations like yours are toothless bulldogs. How would you come in?
Well, clearly, that's misinformation, because we work very hard to improve the quality of education in this country. We are a dedicated lot of educators in this country. And as a union, we generally motivate the enactment of policy and the development of changes in education. We have been around for quite some years now, close to 70 years in this business. So if we were toothless, I don't think we'll have seen a good system of education in this country. We have been the vanguard in support of this education system.
Now, Senator Coltart, teachers are being accused of worsening the quality of education in the country by prioritizing extra lessons at the expense of normal classes. And this continues unabated. What should be done to address this anomaly?
Well, first of all, let me say this, that we need to understand the numbers of teachers in our system. We lost 20,000 of our best teachers in 2007 and 2008. And whilst the amnesty I declared in 2009 has got 15,000 back, we still have 22,000 unqualified teachers in our system. So that undermines the whole system. To compound that issue, you've got the problem of hot seating, and you've got the problem of too many children in classes, and it's almost inevitable that some children will lag behind and will not be able to keep up with the rest of the class. That sometimes necessitates extra lessons. Now, so the point I'm simply making is that extra lessons in of themselves are not wrong. It's when teachers are not in the classrooms during normal working hours and are deliberately creating a situation which necessitates extra private lessons that the problem arises. So in essence, what I'm saying is...
Are you protecting the teachers here?
Well, I'm just saying that we mustn't just throw out extra lessons because they aren't of themselves bad. What we've got to identify is where teachers are exploiting the situation to earn extra money for themselves. If that is happening, if parents feel that that is happening, they must go to their headmaster in the first instance. And if they don't get satisfaction, go to the district education officer and up the line. We will investigate because we will not tolerate this manipulation of extra lessons simply to make money, not to act in the best interests of the child.
Mr. Ndlovu, if you look at, these are some of the reports we have. There are reports that teachers in rural areas do not receive incentives as compared to those in the urban areas who actually receive incentives. Is it true?
Yes, that is very true.
And is that fair?
That is very unfair. Hence we have called it, the system of incentives is not sustainable, it's not equitable, but it has helped in some areas. We have been unable to withdraw it completely because some teachers who are getting those incentives find motivation in them. But let us also indicate clearly that this is not a sustainable alternative way of paying remuneration to educators. And in the long run, this must go away completely. And incentives must revert to their original meaning of incentives, where parents voluntarily award teachers for a good job well done. But then, now what we're seeing as incentives is something else.
Is it still incentives, Senator Coltart, or it's something else?
Well, I've been very consistent regarding incentives. I've said that if I had my way, we'd do away with incentives. But we cannot do away with incentives until we pay teachers a viable wage. Entry-level salaries for teachers now, qualified teachers who've been through college with diplomas, is now $400 per month. Compare that to entry-level payment of salaries to teachers in South Africa, which is about 8,000 Rand. You can see there's a huge gulf. Compare the $400 which to what other professionals, and bear in mind that teachers are professionals in the same way engineers, architects, lawyers are professionals. Compare what teachers are paid to what other professionals are paid in society. And until government is in a position to narrow that gap, we are going to lose teachers if we don't supplement their salaries in some way. But as far as incentives are concerned, they will continue, but the moment we've narrowed that gap, they will be abolished.
You're still watching Melting. Remember, in the studio, we've got the Minister of Education, Sport, Arts and Culture, Senator David Coltart, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe Teachers Association, Mr. Sifiso Ndlovu. And we continue with our discussion. I'll come to Mr. Ndlovu. We are still zooming in on the issue of incentives. So, is the government, would you say the government is running on incentives?
It would be incorrect to suggest that, because the incentives are taking only a small portion of, they're contributing a small portion to the motivation of educators in terms of salaries. Our study has shown that about 20% of the areas that we have receive incentives. 20% of the schools in the country receive incentives. And the range is as small as $20 in some rural schools, and in some other schools goes up to $600, which is even more than what the government is doing. And this is where we find affluent schools really meeting it, and meeting the challenge and exciting teachers about it. And well, like we have indicated, we do not support them totally, but our educators themselves are divided on that issue, and they have not come to an agreement to say scrap them out, because those who are benefiting are saying you would rather come up and get us where we are than to drop us down to where you are. So it's not about taking away from those who are getting and then giving to this, but because it will be just a situation saying get poorer where you are, I don't mind who are teaching.
Now, it's quite good that Senator Coltart is here, because why? He's in government, and I'm just looking at the issue of incentives again. Is the government relying on incentives?
Oscar, there's a crisis in the financing of education. We are not getting sufficient money from Treasury to adequately finance education. Last year, for example, we received a total of $500,000 for capital expenses for the maintenance of 8,500 schools. If you do the maths, you'll see it works out to nothing. We estimate that parents last year paid approximately $200 million through payment of levies into the education sector. And the reality is, and we're very grateful for it, that parents have kept the education sector. Teachers, they've helped buy exercise books, they've helped paint schools, and they've done a wonderful job for our nation. Clearly, government needs to play a much greater role in financing education. But with the economy not growing as fast as we would have hoped, and with flows from Treasury not being what we want, Somebody has to come in and fill the gap, and that's what parents are doing. But in the medium to long term, clearly government must take more responsibility to fund education.
Now, most rural schools, if you look at most rural schools, barely have qualified teaching staff. I'm talking about most rural schools. Yet, as a ministry, you expect a commendable pass rate from those schools. Why?
Well, exactly, and it shows the crisis in education. If you see the difference, for example, at grade 7, between the pass rate in the 8 rural provinces and the 2 urban provinces, you'll be shocked. The pass rate in our 8 predominantly rural provinces is below 30%. The pass rate in the urban provinces of Harare and Bulawayo is over 70%. And it illustrates what you're saying. And the problem is that we've got an unacceptably high percentage of unqualified teachers in rural areas because the conditions there aren't good. They're not paid as the same amount of incentives. Their living conditions are poor. Often their houses are falling apart. And what we've got to do is direct resources towards those rural schools. One thing that government has just done in Cabinet last week, it was announced by the Minister of the Public Service that we are reintroducing rural allowances for rural teachers. And this year as well, through the Education Transition Fund and through money allocated to the Ministry of Education by Treasury, we are going to be focusing more resources on rural schools to ensure that we have adequate sanitation, that we repair houses so that we make teaching in the rural areas more attractive and so try and get a higher percentage of qualified teachers to the rural areas.
Now, Mr. Ndlovu, I know this discussion can go on and on and on, but for the betterment of time, how would you summarize this discussion?
Well, I must agree with you, Oscar, that the issue of incentives is not good, but what is pleasing and which we want to commend that government is reintroducing rural service allowance. That is beautiful. We want to see what the quantums will be like. Otherwise, that is a good step in the right direction. And then the issue of staffing must be addressed by such incentives and good living conditions in the rural areas. And then we can also look at the issue of continuing education for the educators. That will be very important because we want to see educators changing their attitudes, changing their teaching techniques. That can only be done by making sure that they continuously improve by learning, but then that learning must be supported again by funding.
And here are the last words from the Honorable Minister of Education, Sport, Arts and Culture, Senator David Coltart, to the teachers, to the students, to the parents. Your last words.
Oscar, the silver lining in these O-level pass rates, which has generated this debate, is that it has focused our attention as a nation on the crisis in the education sector. There is a crisis, but it's not all bad. The foundations of our education sector are still intact. We are still producing a tremendous product. Speak to any South African university, any international university. The product is good. So we have strong institutions, strong schools, we have committed teachers, we have passionate parents and children, and we simply now need to build on those strengths because we can restore excellence to education in Zimbabwe within a relatively short period.
Viewers, we've come to the end of this informative edition of Melting Pot. Thank you so much for watching. Let me take this opportunity to thank our two guests. We had the Minister of Education, Sport, Arts and Culture, Senator David Coltart, as well as the Chief Executive of the Zimbabwe Teachers Association, Mr. Sifiso Ndlovu. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Melting Pot.